Hey everybody, welcome back. This is the third and final installment of our Level 4 exam webinar series. So if you're just tuning in for the first time, maybe go back a couple steps. We've got two other videos in addition to this one that deal with the Level 4 exams. The first one deals with the writing component, and then the second one deals with the teaching component. And this one here, I'll be talking about the instructor training or the pedagogy part of the Level 4 evaluation. But just like I've been doing in the other ones, this is the first page of the Level 4 course guide, and I've just added a couple links here. If you haven't gone through the online course for the Level 4 online workshop, I've just provided the links here. This is a this is an unmarked version of it, so it won't be attached to your member profile at all. But it's worth going through this if you're planning to come to the Level 4 exams this year. And many of you are. So we have a Level 4 exam starting next week at Tremblant, which has a couple, one English group and one French group. And then we have a whole bunch of people registered in April for the Level 4 exam at Lake Louise from April 4 to 7. And my kind of plead with you on that one would be, if you are planning to come, please sign up as soon as you can, because it really helps us to make sure that we have it adequately staffed and the planning can happen. And the sooner we know how many people are coming, just the more prepared we can be. So if you're going to come to the April exam, please sign up as soon as possible. So as I mentioned, today we're talking about the instructor training or the pedagogy component of the Level 4 evaluation. And so I'm just going down to the evaluation section of the course guide here, and it says Part C says that candidates will be asked to present an advanced instructor training session, approximately 60 minutes in duration, geared towards experienced snowboard instructors. And so, approximately 60 minutes, you'll be given a 60-minute, 55 to 60-minute window to run your session. Candidates will be pre-assigned 2 portions to build the session. And so the 2 parts that you'll be assigned, and the assignments for the pedagogy exams happen the evening prior to your session. So you'll get a teaching skill, a practical teaching skill. So an example would be guest service and safety, or communication and lesson structure, plus a riding skill. So position and balance, pressure, edging, pivot, or timing and coordination. And then it says session topics will be pre-assigned 1 day prior to the exam. Sessions will be expected to address and develop each of the 2 assigned topics. So this is one of the big things, or the big outcomes that we're looking for from the instructor training evaluation, is that you are improving the group's teaching skills and simultaneously improving their writing skills through the technical info that you choose to show in the session. And then again, just like in the teaching side, 2 evaluators will mark the sessions, and the average mark will be used to establish the final. So this was an update for this year, and this will apply over to the teaching component as well. You'll have 2 markers. Both at the end of your session will provide a number mark, and then those 2 numbers are averaged to get your final mark, with a 6 or above being meet standard and a 5 or below being below standard. And again, the end result that you receive in the marking system is a meets or a below standard. And the number is there simply to give you a little more clarity as to whether your session was quite a ways off the mark in terms of the standard, very close, or just there, just meeting the standard, or way better, or way above and beyond the standard. So it's just a bit more of a feedback tool for you when you get your feedback at the end of your evaluation. All right, so let's look at the specifics of the instructor training assessment. And so this is in the course guide as well. And these points are generally taken from the marking system as well, the marking criteria that the evaluation staff will mark against. But the general outcome that we're looking for here is that you teach advanced instructor training sessions in accordance with CASI methodologies and techniques. So advanced instructor training sessions. So we're talking about, we sort of generally classify these as experienced instructors. And for the purposes of your evaluation, you can think of it as running a training session for the people who you have in your group at the time. So really, you were expecting that you have comfort and confidence in running a training session for your peers, essentially, and teaching instructors who have a considerable amount of experience. In the real world, it might be instructors at your resort who are past the level 1, maybe even past the level 2 level, and are working towards maybe the level 3. As a level 4, you will probably be involved as an evaluator, most likely be involved as a course evaluator for CASI, running level 1, 2, 3, maybe even level 4 courses at some point. So that's kind of the context that these sessions fall into. So we have a number of criteria that we look at with these sessions. And remember, these are 60-minute sessions. You have some prep time because you're pre-assigned the topic. So you do have some prep time to put a plan in place. And we'll look at an example session outline in a few minutes here. But you can generally sort of break these sessions down into a number of parts. So the first one is the introduction. Clearly and effectively introduces the session goals, pedagogy, and technical goals. This is the number one most common pitfall, I think, that I've experienced or witnessed as I've been a part of level 4 evaluations over the years. And it's that really this session introduction and setting up the goals of your training session is absolutely crucial so that the rest of the session falls into place. And so you have two goals really to tackle here, is to improve some aspect of your group's teaching skills and improve some aspect of their writing skills. And remember, this is an instructor training session, so you're always looking towards the end of the session. And when we set up this session introduction, really what you're trying to answer is, in an hour's time, when we leave this session, you should be better at incorporating this thing into your teaching and incorporating this movement into your writing. So those are the big things to answer. If you really are clear and specific with those goals, then it really helps the rest of the session fall into place. The second part deals with the pedagogy development. So this is the actual teaching and development and mileage and training that you add to the session to really help your students become better at whatever the teaching skill is that you're trying to work on. So effectively improves the participants' understanding of the teaching skill. So are you able to add some element of this into your session of your students getting some mileage with this teaching skill? So for example, if it's a feedback or an A&I session, are they going to get a chance to practice giving feedback using whatever considerations that you're trying to offer for them? If it's a demonstration session, are you able to work in a chance for them to practice some demos? Are they going to be able to watch you do some demos? Just like you would do if you were improving their writing skills, you give them some mileage and some feedback. For me, this is a really important way to make your training sessions stand out at the level 4, is if you can incorporate that aspect of hands-on kind of development with the teaching aspect of your session. Structures the session in a logical format, clearly distinguishes between the roles of trainer and instructor. And so this is one of the big separators from level 3 basic instructor training sessions to level 4. And we talk about this at the level 4 course quite a bit, is that at the level 3 or in a basic instructor training session, it's a very simple formula of, you're the trainer and you're introducing a teaching skill. And then you're kind of breaking roles and you're kind of in that mock instructor role, showing a demonstration of the teaching skill in action. And then you're back as the trainer, kind of recapping things. For these sessions, because they're much more fluid, a little bit less black and white, that role change may be much more interchangeable, but it should be clear when you're running a session, when you're talking about talking in the context of teaching the public and when you're talking in the context of training instructors. And that really is down to your experience level and the way that you tackle that problem in your session. And then the last one uses questions as a tool in interacting with the group and developing understanding. So one of the main differences between the teaching evaluation or a lesson, I guess, in real world and the session is that oftentimes an instructor training session can be much more discussion based. Where in a lesson, if you're the instructor who's paid to teach a lesson, even if it's for expert students, there's going to be much more of it's a little bit more of a kind of a one-way kind of communication, not in a negative sense, but there's less room for sort of discussion around experience and past experience of your instructors. Whereas in an instructor training session, there's a little bit more room for kind of discussion through questioning. What is your experience with this teaching skill? What have you found teaching students learning this type of movement, that type of questioning? And then we get into the pedagogy demonstration. So this is where, as the first point says, you're able to provide a clear example of the teaching skill that you've been assigned throughout the whole training session. So you will be assigned a teaching skill, whether that's demonstrations, A&I, technical content, guest service and safety, communication and lesson structure. So in addition to developing your group's understanding of that teaching skill, we also want to see that you can use that teaching skill in a refined way and show that you really understand that teaching skill. And then provides realistic tactics and tools that instructors can apply in their lessons. So as I said earlier, one of your main goals here when you wrap up this session at the end of the 60 minutes is that your group should walk away from your session with a really clear sense of what they can take on the teaching side, for example, and apply to the next lesson that they teach. So that takeaway message or that sort of summary kind of idea that they can go down and pick up a student and start teaching a lesson, whether it's a beginner or intermediate or an advanced lesson. What could they take from your session and apply to it to make their next lesson better? That's ultimately your goal here as the session leader. And then we have some of the other ones that carry over from the teaching. So your demos, that they're clear and they're at the skill level of your participants, and they are relevant to what you're introducing on the technical side. And then analysis and improvement, as usual, that you're recognizing any causes of difficulty. You could apply these points as well around analysis and improvement, not only to your session participants, your group's writing skills, but also their ability to use this teaching skill. And that goes back to that pedagogy development point, is if you're giving the group some chances to practice using these teaching skills, or giving them some mileage with some of these teaching ideas, then you can also give them some feedback. So a common one would be, say, in a session where you're improving your group's analysis and improvement skills, if you're giving them a chance to practice analyzing and improving each other, then you also have an opportunity to add another layer there as the session leader and provide some feedback on their ANI, or feedback on feedback in some ways. But of course, you're also trying to give them some feedback on their writing skills as well. The tactics, drills, and exercises should be relevant to the student trial and should help your students improve, and improves the technical writing skill of the group. And again, you could also apply that to improving the teaching skills of the group as well. And then all of the normal or common sort of group management and safety aspects. So provides a positive, safe, and student-centered learning environment, conveys confidence and leadership. And we talked about this on the previous video. In the teaching side, confidence and leadership really shines through in your ability to adopt that role of the leader, a confident leader, in passing on your teaching experience to your peers and to people who have maybe equivalent experience to you, maybe even more experience to you, but it comes down to that confidence and that leadership ability. Effectively uses terrain as a teaching tool, employs a creative approach to teaching at this expert level, and paces the lesson to cater to high-level students or instructors in this case, as it's an instructor training session. So all of those things should be there as well. Remember, it's a training session for instructors, but as we're working through advanced skills here, there's a certain amount of mileage that's required, and some pace and some student trial, and all of those things that you would incorporate into a high-level lesson that can be incorporated into this session as well. So those are the big aspects that we're looking for from your session. I'll quickly skim down to the evaluation form so we can look at how it's laid out in the evaluations. And it's really based on the same thing. So instructor training, so your introduction, so introduces those goals, yes or no. It's a really clear idea. So on the teaching side, you hopefully have a goal that you're chasing under your assigned teaching skill, and on the writing side as well, you probably have a writing competency or outcome that you're going to be chasing or improving. The development, so does the group have a better understanding of the teaching skill that you're introducing, and are they able to employ that teaching skill in a more effective way in the lessons that they teach? Pedagogy demonstration, are you showing a clear example of the teaching skill in action as you work through that session? Is your communication effective, right? Presentation, pace, method of presentation, language used, keywords, concise, specific, all of those things. And is it movement-based and simple language? So movement-based, an example that we often talk about is zeroing in on a part of the body at a part of the turn or a part of the maneuver. Simple things that carry over from your lessons and your teaching into your instructor training sessions. And then demonstrations, obviously demos that are at the skill level of the student, but all of the other basics around providing demos in a good teaching kind of atmosphere, which would be, are they visible? Do students have multiple viewpoints? Do you give multiple demonstrations? Are you directing your students to zero in on a certain part of your demonstration so that everybody's on the same page about what to look for? And then with ANI, recognizes student difficulty and provides relevant feedback. And then our common, positive, safe, student-centered learning environment, confident, effective, and enthusiastic leader. So that's how it's marked, and that's how it's laid out in the marking system too, in your My Courses part of your member profile when you look back on the feedback. So one thing I just want to draw attention to here is this is a sample session plan that was presented at the Level 4 course this year. So it's just an example of how you might use this tool, this session plan document, to lay out your thoughts for your sessions. And hopefully, if you've been training for a while for the level 4 exam, you should have a whole whack of these session plans worked out. You know, if you were really prepared, you could have a session plan worked out for any topic that you're asked to run a session on. And hopefully you've done some practice with these. It's also worth noting that this document or this session plan isn't the required document. We don't collect these. It's simply a tool or a resource for you to use to organize your thoughts. You may do better with a different format. You might find it more, you might find this kind of limiting in terms of your ideas and info. So you might be better using a blank sheet of paper or some totally different format, that an Excel document, for example, something that helps you to organize your thoughts better. But this is just one resource that's provided. So the teaching skill, in this case, that would be assigned is the analysis and improvement, and the writing skill is timing and coordination. And then from there, it's up to you to zero in on something a little bit more specific with each one. So on the skill side, we're obviously looking for you to zero in on one of those more specific components of that skill. So in this case, the session will deal more with the coordination side of timing and coordination. And on the analysis and improvement side, we're going to zero in on how we deliver improvement. That's not the only thing that will give you more specific, refined info. For example, in A&I, just zeroing in on analysis and improvement, that's a common way to be more specific. But really, the entire teaching theory section of the CASI reference guide is all pedagogy info that you can dive deeper into. And really, when we set up these goals around the teaching skills that you're assigned here for these sessions, one of the things that we're looking for is that you can go beyond the basic pedagogy info or teaching info that's presented, say, on the level 3 course, the level 3 pedagogy evaluation, where we're passing on really the basics of those practical teaching skills. So what are the basics of guest service and safety? What are the basics of communication and lesson structure? What we're looking for you to do now is to take a deeper dive into those teaching skills. And that's going to mean cracking open the reference guide and going to some of these sections in that teaching theory chapter, and really reading and finding some of those finer details around guest service and safety, for example, or around communication and lesson structure. What are some things that, you know, a new instructor may not know yet, just because they're not at that level of their development, but an experienced instructor could benefit from knowing and adding to their teaching. Having said that, one thing that I did say in the teaching video as well about the teaching component is one of the things that we're not looking for is for you to invent new concepts or new ideas. And so the general rule of thumb there for me anyway is that if you can't find it in the reference guide somewhere, then it's probably not worth risking the gamble of introducing that in a session. Creativity is good, but it's definitely possible to be too creative with these sessions. We really want to see that you have a refined understanding of the CASI technique and CASI teaching methodologies. So then as we progress down in the session plan here, these are the most important 2 parts of this session planning exercise, I think. And that's where we identify what's the goal around the teaching skill that you want your students, your instructors in your group to walk away with, and what's the goal along with the writing skill. So this is at the end of the session, we should have improved our ability to give feedback by exploring different methods of delivering improvement, the descriptive aspect. And we should also have developed our ability to apply rotational movements in the park for versatility and improved coordination. So these are the 2 takeaway messages. And once you have those things really laid out, the rest of this stuff should really fall into place. And it becomes much easier to fill in the rest of this session plan. The other little trick or tip that I always use when I'm planning these sessions is I usually start on the technical side. So anytime we teach a lesson, like a skill improvement lesson or a writing lesson, we use all of the teaching skills anyway. So I always find it easier to start by planning the right-hand side of this sheet, plan a really good lesson, identify a clear goal that it relates to the skill that you're assigned, identify an introduction, exercise or tactic, a little bit of a warm-up, and then some clear development tactics here in the middle, and some feedback points and some cool down and wrap up sort of ideas. And once you have a really strong technical lesson in place, for me, it's much easier to go back and then layer in the pedagogy talk around the teaching skill that you're assigned, in this case, the A&I. Because if you teach a good lesson, you're going to be using good guest service and safety. You're going to be using communication and lesson structure. You'll be providing demos, hopefully. You'll be using A&I, and the technical content should be on point. So once you have a good lesson, it's much easier to overlay just the talk around the chosen teaching skill. For me, it's much more difficult to start with the teaching skill side and then try to add in the technical information. So that would be my advice for this pedagogy exam, is just teach a great lesson that obviously that speaks to the skill that you're assigned. And then remember that throughout that lesson, you're looking ahead and you're in your hour, in your 60 minutes, and remembering that at the end of it, you need to have your group walk away with having some new ideas or new skills around their own teaching skills. And so it just needs to be specific to the teaching skill that you've been assigned. One of the big things that I find is a really good thing to keep checking in with yourself through the 60 minutes, these 60-minute sessions, is the use of pedagogy language. And so there's, in the teaching video that I did recently, I talked about how there's some things that you do in a lesson that you don't do in a session, and things that you do in a session that you probably don't do in a lesson. This is one of those things. So the language that you use with clients who are there for a lesson, or students, sometimes is different than the language you'll use with instructors. And with instructors, remember, the goal is for them to walk away being better instructors and better riders, but having better teaching skills. So some of the language changes a little bit because you're trying to pass on your experience and your knowledge around this teaching skill. So I really break it up into sort of three big parts. And there's sort of three kind of statements, pedagogy statements, that I always sort of listen for, or I try to include in my pedagogy sessions if I'm training instructors. And those would be, the first one would be watch for, and then you could add sort of a blank or a ... after. So watch for my use of what, why, how communication, or watch for my exaggeration in my demo on this part of the run, or watch for the places that I stand in order to analyze your riding in this section of the run. The next one would be, did you notice statements? So did you notice blank? So did you notice how my communication was very simple and concise? Or did you notice where I positioned myself so I could see everybody? Did you notice how my feedback followed a PTT format, that type of thing? And then the third statement that I always try to incorporate into a pedagogy session is the statement that would be, when you're teaching this ... or blank. So when you're teaching this skill, technical skill, be mindful of these things. Or when you're teaching, when you're using this new approach to giving feedback, don't forget these things, because really this is about improving their ability to teach a good lesson in the future. So those are some ways that you might be able to organize in your head some of those pedagogy ideas, just by adjusting your language a little bit, just so that it's very clear for the evaluation staff at the level 4 that this is an instructor training session, and that you have that context really dialed there on who your audience is in this session, different from a skill development lesson. So that's it for the instructor training. Like I said, hopefully if you've been training for a while for the certification, you've been out there doing some practice sessions, or at the very least writing some of these session plans down. You have the advantage in this evaluation for the level 4, you have the advantage of being pre-assigned the teaching skill and the riding skill. So it is definitely possible for you to go through and pre-plan a lot of this stuff. And then the other thing that I always find that we say is that a plan is good, but don't let your plan on paper hold you back from delivering a really good session. So be adaptable to changes, and be adaptable to unexpected things in your group or on the mountain, in the environment. If you plan to use a certain run, or you plan to use the park and the park happens to be closed, don't stick to your plan so rigidly that it causes you to be kind of stuck to that and not able to change and go with the flow of the session as it plays itself out. That would be probably my last sort of parting advice there for this instructor training session. So good luck. That's the three parts of the level 4 evaluation process: the riding and the teaching and the instructor training. And if you're coming to the exams this spring, hopefully you've been doing your training and you have good luck during the 3 days or the 4 days that you're there for the exam. And hopefully everything works out well for you.